All of our files are free and will remain free. If you like the show, you can show support by donating $1 to help with expenses. Just use the PayPal link on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Thanks.
Welcome back to part 2 of this program about magic, really. Economical magic, and we have a magician-in-chief with us, Robert Bonomo, trying his best patiently to explain to us how it's all related, and getting some occasional opposition from me.
Cool.
as a good dichotomy. And you have been going through all these exotic notions, like what is called modern monetary theory, the reality of today.
Exactly, MMT, yeah.
Yeah. And it breaks with all traditional...
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's kind of an idea whose moment arrived. Like, for example, when Mario Draghi left as the head of the ECB, in his good farewell speech, one of the things he mentioned was we might have to use MMT, which was kind of shocking to hear Mario Draghi say this, no?
Okay.
And last fall, this must have been in November, around there, Ray Dalio, who's the manager of the largest hedge fund in the world, Ray Dalio wrote a piece about modern monetary theory and how it's something that we're probably going to have to use in the next recession.
Right.
So this has already been kind of set up.
Because, this is an area where very many people know very little. And basically because the whole area is just smokes and mirrors, right?
Exactly. Because nobody is thinking about actually the other end of the equation. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's make all this money, but, where does it come from?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But still, it seems more and more people are aware of this thing. But the problem, of course, is how they're doing quantitative easing all the time without... they don't need approval from is it the Congress or the Senate? I always mix those up.
Yeah, they need they need no approval from the House. Yeah, most financial matters are done through the House.
Yeah, House. That means Congress, right?
Right, exactly.
So in 2008 they had to, but not anymore. So basically it's just a tap that's open all the time.
Oh yeah, and even in 2008 they passed a bill. I think it was for like $1 trillion of stimulus, but the Fed on its own, this is crazy. Nobody knows exactly how much was printed, but there was an estimate. It was close to a trillion. Yeah. $1 trillion was printed in a week or two to save the world's banks.
Yeah. But are you familiar with Catherine Austin Fitts?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So you're aware of the black economy aspect?
Exactly, and very much aware of her 21 trillion, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, which is much more now, I think. But yeah, because I'm gonna in the third segment discuss that with you too.
Oh, okay.
But we have yet new frontiers to visit. We haven't discussed everything yet, so we do that, and then we can enter the black economy at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start discussing the next step, the schools, the different philosophical, Hayek and Keynes were very hyped a few years ago, that dichotomy, right? So just...
Exactly. You have the Austrian school and the Keynesian school.
Yeah.
But the thing is...
And the Marxist school, I'd say, too.
Sure.
So I want to start this part too, Robert, by flaunting to you something, concept that I heard. You know the professor in economy called Richard Wolff?
Richard Wolff.
Yeah. I heard him explain... he's a specialist or an expert in stuff like Marx. And many people, today Marx is like a derogatory word. Cultural Marxism, which is a completely irrational concept because Marx is about economy. So, the word has lost all meaning. But if you go back to the old school original, Marx just analyzed how capitalism works.
Sure.
And then he also launched some suggestions of how to deal with it. And then other people took that and ran with it, like Lenin. And from there, all this socialist and communism thing started. Mm-hmm. But if you go back to the origin, before he took this political, he analyzed the system. And they're still using his analysis in all sorts, in business school, in all sorts of economy. Now, I say he didn't account for, neither did Hayek or Keynes or any of these people who came after Marx. Mm-hmm. They didn't account for the sci-fi reality we're in now. And that's part of why I think modern monetary system is kind of even more magic than the old school thing, and also this space thing. Mm-hmm. But back to the point. Wolf said, go back to the basic. An employer should really be called a work buyer because he's buying your work. And an employee a laborer, a worker should really be called a work seller because I'm selling my work when someone hires me. Now imagine you're doing some work. I mean, he explained this perfectly. I'm going to try now to put it back together. But he said that if you do some work, it's a finite production, right? It's defined, it's limited by how long do I stomach working on this thing, and how good are my skills, and all sorts of natural limits. Mm-hmm. But then maybe I invent something that makes it go faster, and I find a way to, my neighbor, he doesn't do anything. So I say to him, hey, look, I'm growing these oranges or whatever. Could you help me? Let's say we share it, the workload 50-50. Mm-hmm. And I'll pay you 40%, maybe, if I'm generous, of the income I get when I sell it, because it's my oranges. This is the origin to the concept of possession, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, he says. And then I realize, I can get even more people to do this. And so gradually I involve more and more people to doing the actual work, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually I just retire because I have now 10 people, 100 people doing this work, and I'm paying them less and less, but they still find value in it. Otherwise they don't have options, whatever. So the system creates leeches who doesn't produce anything, but who are just skimming, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. And they, in our system today, they are propped up as the people who are invaluable, or they need billions, these CEOs, they need billions in salaries. And if you, the lowly worker who actually produced the values, if you try to say something, few on you, bad. So this is his perspective, that there are someone who actually produce the values, and then there's a bunch of structures or people or whatever who leeching from the values. And then we can talk about stock markets and stuff, which is good examples, or the banks. So first off, what do you think about this definition that I gave?
Well, I've worked in corporate America. So I've worked in big companies, very big companies. Take a company like United Parcel Service, which is a massive company.
Right.
And that was started by a guy on a bicycle. And it's the same story. He started on a bicycle in Seattle, I believe.
That's why you're using shorts?
and he slowly, it's the same story. And he slowly built up. I think it's one of the most impressive organizations, logistic organizations in the world. Mm. And so if we looked at it from his perspective, he would say, well, that family that started it, once they got the ball rolling, they backed off and were leeches. And I would entirely disagree with that. Mm. Because managing a company like United Parcel Service, and some of the hardest working people in the world, and also guys who are very well paid, but they work their asses off. Everyone.
Oh yeah, but then they're working, and you said money is work, right?
Exactly.
But there are people who have money without working for it, so they accumulate other people's energy.
Exactly. And that's where I would agree with him if we take that example and put it onto, say, a Wall Street, what Wall Street does. And let me give you an example of this. And I think it's a fascinating example. do you remember in the financial crisis in 2008, the summer of 2008, all economists today would agree, and I was working in advertising and I saw it. In the summer of 2008, everything just started to collapse. Everything. We're like, what is going on? And then in the fall of 2008, the whole thing just went down the toilet, right? The price of oil hit an all-time high, $145 a barrel in July of 2008. And that really just, I kept wondering, how did this happen? So that means the demand for oil was going down, right? And oil hit $145 a barrel. And I finally found the answer. And it's what he was saying. It's a trade, a special trade called the contango trade. So a bunch of guys on Wall Street with computers, to keep it simple, were buying oil today and selling it 3 months from now at a higher price, driving up the price and making money. What they were doing is they were creating nothing. But by manipulating financial markets with money that they borrowed, so they would borrow money. And remember, when you borrow money, you create it, right? So they were creating what you said, work out of nothing, and using it to do nothing but to drive prices up. Then I would agree with him. Okay. But to do that, it's work. So it gets complicated.
Well, you can find systems to do it. But if my father has accumulated a lot of work energy, and then he dies, and I'm a spoiled brat, and I get everything, I haven't lifted a finger for that. So we can't deny the fact that there are other people's work is floating about as value. And there's a battle to get, because this wasn't meant as a social criticism. This was meant as an objective analysis of what's going on. But you have to analyze it from a neutral perspective. And then you have to acknowledge that, yes, people are putting in work and other people are skimming that energy. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what's going on. That's part of what's going on. And so.
But you can't create something out of nothing.
Well, isn't that what we do when we involve the future?
So imagine if your father went out and he worked very hard and he had a farm and he jarred lots of vegetables and tomatoes, cured it and put it and pickled them. And then he died and you spent 5 years just eating that, doing nothing. You see what I mean?
Then I consume it. Yes. I spend that money or that energy.
Yeah. You spent that money. Exactly. But is that necessarily, I think that's a better example. You know what I mean?
Well, that's an everyday example, and it's not even a problem. It's normal that we inherit something from our parents, but it's not normal. If my father was like this, he was involved in these schemes back in 2008, right? And accumulated a lot of value. And then I inherited that. It's the sweat of other people's work is basically what it boils down to. And we're both doing value judgments here, but that wasn't my point. My point was just that we do accumulate this energy and it's circulating. It's not just 100% my energy being 100% spent. Most of my energy that I put into something goes to someone else. Otherwise they wouldn't hire me. Otherwise they wouldn't be. That's the point. So when there are workers in a factory, they're not getting 100% back. No. They're getting maybe 1% back, something like that. Depends how big is it's easier if it's like a small scale business, let's say a restaurant or something, right?
Yeah. A restaurant's a good example, I think.
Yeah. And I'm a lover of small businesses. That's how society will get around if you allow people to start businesses in a small scale. When it becomes corporations, that's when we are screwed. So I think they should be forbidden, actually, because it's I feel an existential threat from the way society is developing, because it's harder and harder to do small business. More and more people are getting sucked into the corporate world. I'm not just talking about a jet set. I'm talking about also low, like Amazon, workers being driven to death, getting almost nothing back. And
wearing diapers.
Yeah. And the problem with this is that eventually the corporations take over everything. And when people are dependent on them, they will also tend not to support measures that goes against the corporations because they feel it goes against themselves. They feel threatened, right? Yeah. So if corporations grow big enough and take over enough people, they will own the system, the political system. And this is why I'm sympathetic to stuff like unions and worker demands, because they do put in the energy, and they should have the right to push the owners or the work buyers to get some of it back. If not, then a neutral entity like the state must intervene and say, like, okay, here's UBI or something. Because otherwise we'll end up like they always do before a revolution.
Right.
Namely depression and revolt. And like FDR said, he said, I didn't kill capitalism, I saved capitalism. You know, when the rich people...
Sure.
They didn't understand, because he's right. If he didn't do this New Deal, there would be revolts in the streets, and they would either have communism or Nazism. You know, it would go either way, right? In Germany, it went to National Socialism, but it could just as well have gone to, like in Russia, right? And that's what happens if you screw the majority of the people and give them no choice.
And the other thing with corporations, and it's interesting, I teach at a university, you know, and I teach a class on negotiation. And the other day we were discussing something, and I asked them, I said, well, do you believe we live in a democracy? And everyone said yes. And then I drew a pyramid on the board, and I said, most of you will wind up working for a corporation. What are corporations? Are they democratic? And they kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, no, corporations are fascist.
Yeah.
They're purely fascist.
Tyranny.
Yeah, I mean, complete. And even all of the symbols they use and the titles and the offices, the whole thing. I mean, it's pure fascism. So I said, look, most of your time you're going to spend in a fascist corporation, and you'll spend, a little bit of time in democracy, and then you got to spend some time with your wife, so I don't know what that's called. And then you put that all together and you see what I mean? So to say that we live in a democracy is absolutely absurd.
Especially when money isn't democratized.
And that's true, because when that guy goes to work for a week and gets paid whatever, $500, he sees his work in exchange for $500. But then some guy in Wall Street goes to the bank and says, hey, banker, create for me $5 million right now out of nothing, and let me use it with some leverage, and I make $10 million doing a trade. There's something wrong with that, because actually creating value with work and getting money for it is different than playing around with you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's something fundamentally wrong with this.
And
even
this
is one, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe even worse than that are those, I think Mitt Romney got rich from this, is those who buy up companies and kill them.
Right, Bain Capital. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Could you explain how that works?
Yeah, sure. They would just go into a company, right? That was maybe not doing so well financially. They would buy the company with leverage. Now, it's important. People say, what does that mean with leverage? It means I have $1 million and the bank gives me another 10 million that they created from nothing. I buy this company. I fire half the people. I make it profitable. And then I sell it for a profit. But since I bought with leverage, I didn't just make 10%. I made 10 times 10. I made 100%. Yeah. You see?
Yeah. This is one of the things that is quenching the so-called free market. Another thing that's quenching the free market is hostile takeovers. If you have competition in the meaning, and we talk about the marketplace now, not health or fire or whatever, then it's healthy that you have many people who try to be innovative and come in new solutions. But if you have one big monopolies, they will take over and kill the competition before they, or as soon as they reach you see, this is why YouTube went to hell. This is why Google went to hell. Exactly. In Norway, it's a perfect example, because in Norway, we used to be socialist, and then in the 80s, everything was privatized all over the world. So they tried that with two different lines of professions. One was the phone networks. We call it tele network. And so they privatized that. And today we have super cheap mobile phones. We have much, I'm talking about, not the physical phones, but what do we call it in English? Phone company, network. That what you call it?
Yeah, like
you have T-Mobile and you have.
Oh, right, yeah. The telecoms.
Telecom, yeah. So the telecom industry works very well here. It's cheaper than in America. We have freer. Everything is much better. I know this because I've discussed this with an American friend of mine, and what she tells me is a horror stories. You're actually under a monopoly when it comes to telecom. But here it's super cheap. Everything works with perfect principle of competition and all that. But then we have another profession, the electricity. There they didn't do that. They didn't do the same thing there. They have they halfway privatized it, and it's like halfway competition. So there you have like big monoliths, and they're in bed with the state, and it's price fixing, and it's exploitation, and it's corruption, and it's horrible, man. Horrible, just horrible.
Exactly.
So there are different models that we could apply in the world that would work. And there are models that is subverting how stuff work. And all I'm saying is, as long as the system is rigged, and obviously rigged for the top, then it's just fair and square that normal people get something back. And I don't want to hear how you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. And they should, and just to go back to the money thing, because a lot of people get a little bit confused about this. When you go to a bank, and you borrow $100,000, you sign a piece of paper that says, I will pay $100,000 in 5 years. You give it to the bank, and they create the money out of nothing, and they give it to you. And you pay them interest for the service. So remember, they don't keep the $100,000. They keep the interest. That's what they get paid. The $100,000, when you pay it back, it gets destroyed. But there's something fundamentally wrong with that system, because what you're paying them back is work. And what they're giving you, it's kind of like this weird monopoly. Like, why can't I do that? Imagine if you had a friend. Imagine you had a friend, and you went to that friend and you said, let me borrow $500. And he had a special printer, and he printed out the $500. And he said, and you got to pay me $50 to do this. You would feel a little strange. You'd be like, man, this doesn't seem so fair. And he says, and if you don't pay me back, I'm going to take your house. Yeah, you know what I mean? There's something that rubs you the wrong way, but that's what banks do. They have
the printer.
The government says these banks, they're allowed to print out that. I mean, this is a metaphor. Obviously, it's digital, but imagine they can print out the money, and when you bring it back to them, they have to put it in the shredder, but you got to pay them an extra 10%, and that 10% they keep. It's something that rubs people the wrong way. And most people don't understand that. Most people in the United States, if you ask them, what do banks do? They say banks take deposits, pay 1%, they lend for 5%, and they make the difference. Remember, that's not what banks do. And when you understand that, you see the world in a different way. And I'll give you another example. They used to say, when I studied history, they used to say, wars are good for the economy. And I used to think, how the hell are wars good for an economy? Because you build tanks and artillery and ships, but they don't produce anything. No. You know what I mean? They don't make paper clips.
It's good for the military industry, of course.
Right, but yeah, exactly. It's good for those industries, but these things that they produce, they don't make anything. All they do is destroy things.
Yeah.
So I remember there's one economist, a libertarian, who's very funny. He says, if that were true, we could every 5 years build an enormous navy, get into the middle of the ocean and sink it, and it would be good for the economy. We wouldn't have to kill anybody. We could just sink it in the middle of the ocean. But what he's saying, you see what I mean?
I guess in that equation, when they say war is good for the economy, is it a short-term fact that we're producing a lot of stuff, war stuff that employs people, or is it the fact that it means you're invading and, stealing other people's resources?
No, not at all. I think it's actually it's good for the economy if you don't lose the war. It's good for the economy because you create an enormous amount of money and you use the total potential of the country. The total potential. When there's a war on, no one says, the Germans are coming. Can we afford the 15 tanks or 20 tanks? No one says that. No. They say, how many tanks can we build?
Yeah, right.
You see what I mean? Yeah. We'll pay for it. That's what they mean that it's good for the economy. We have 1 million soldiers. We need 1 million pair of pants. They don't say, can we afford 1 million or should we only afford 500,000 pair of pants for these soldiers? You see what I mean? Mm. Can we make 100,000 pairs of pants? Yes, make them. That's what's happening with the coronavirus. It's a war.
Yeah, and this corona thing will be here all summer, and it will diminish in the autumn.
So we've forgotten entirely this thing of who's going to pay. No. What potential as a society do we have? And I'll give you a really interesting example. The other day I was watching Governor Cuomo of New York, and he said something really interesting. He said, we have in New York City 3,000 ventilators for people who are in very bad shape. And he said we need thousands and thousands more, or people are going to be dying unnecessarily. And he said, all the money in the world can't buy me ventilators. There are no ventilators. You see what I mean? So the politician doesn't say, it was very interesting because it's a real situation. He didn't say, we don't have money to buy ventilators. He said, there are no ventilators. And you can't just make these things in 10 minutes. These aren't masks. So see, that's the limits of a society. And we're going to see those limits today. How many ICU units do we have? How many ventilators do we have? And that's the limits on our potential. It's not the money. If we could imagine if there were in Canada, 100,000 ventilators, would money be an issue? Of course not. We would just buy them. So this is what when these moments of crisis, what they do is they pull back the blind a little bit, and they let us peek in and see the only thing that limits us is potential. It's never money. And please, after this crisis, don't let them go back to saying, well, we have to pay it back. No, we need austerity. Austerity. What they did in Europe with that austerity, now those politicians and bankers should be strung up.
Yeah.
I would have no qualms about stringing up about 50 of those suits on that austerity stuff, because how many people really suffered? I know in Spain they suffered.
Oh, yeah, all over the board. But, and Greece.
All they had to do was money. All they had to do was print money, and that was it.
Yeah. But there's still, there's something I can't grasp here, because in a way, there's still a fight over people's value. Everybody contributes. Well, the old school model is that the economy is a sum of the work we put in. Now, with the new monetary theory, that's not true anymore, but because...
No, it is. Because that's the limit.
Look, prices. Take prices. Look at medicines in America. Someone make that medicine, and that's work, right? And then it comes finished, and it's a product in the pharmacy shelf.
Sure.
At that point, it has a price. Someone is setting the price, and obviously the price is more than it cost to produce it. Yep. If we just bought what it cost to produce, everybody would be happy. The worker would get its due. Those who produced the ingredients gets its due. Everybody gets its due. But it's priced more than it cost to make. And that difference between what it cost to make and the final price the consumer has to buy is, at least in the old model, is taken from everybody, is taken from the collective. That's like, because and it goes in the pocket of whoever owns it, right? And in America it's extreme, because if you go to Canada or Mexico, you can get the same medicine for a certain amount, still more than it costs to produce. But in America, it's like 10 times more. And that's...
And why is that in America and not, say, in Switzerland?
Well, we know why it is. It's because they're price gouging these things, because you don't have universal health care. But that's not my point. I wasn't going political. I was trying to understand the economy aspect. Because if I say, okay, here, you can buy this, look, I made a medicine for you. The price is 500 trillion. Everybody in the world has to chip in to afford this. You see what I mean? The money comes from somewhere, and it's our work. It's what we've chipped in of work, right? At least that's in the old model. In the new model, I'm thinking maybe not. I'm still trying to grasp to understand this, because everything is priced, meaning there is the actual work put in, and then there's the profit, the fiction kind of, and it has to come from somewhere, right? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? It's very hard to do this even in my own language, let alone trying to communicate this in English. But are you seeing what I'm inquiring about?
Let's go back to way back in the day when a pharmacist actually made his medicine. So he smashes up some I don't know, some roots and some seeds. He smashes it up and he puts it in a little bottle with some alcohol in it. And he says, how much is my work worth? How much is this worth? And he tries to sell it. And that's where the market comes in. The market comes in and gives it a price. The market gives it the price. He doesn't give it the price, and the buyer doesn't give it. The market gives it the price.
Yeah, that's when you actually have a market.
That's when you make a market. And that's where, and now I think you and I agree a lot on this. There are places where that sort of function, that's perfect. When I go to buy vegetables, I want to have 5 guys selling vegetables. I hate supermarkets. I love going to markets or little shops. You know, the guy knows me and there's another guy next door. So if this guy screws me, I can go to the guy next door. I like that.
Let me add, you don't even need unions in situations like that, because people, there's 5 people working there. The guy who runs the place knows that if they are happy, they will do good job for him, etc. Right? So studies show that in small businesses, they have personal relations. Of course, there can be psychopaths running it, right? But they tend to care for their workers.
Yeah.
So that battle, that class battle, is kind of diminished there. But when you have corporations, you're stuck in a fascist system. You have to fight it somehow, you know? But anyway, back to your point.
In that sense, the market creates the price. But in that corporate fascist system, and this is something that's very important that I think is related to this, you know, human evolution, when we were hunter-gatherers, the largest groups we were in were about 150. And there was usually an alpha male that kind of ran the show. But that alpha male could be taken out by 2 or 3 guys with some rocks. So there was a balance. And that's where normal human relation, of course, sometimes there were psychopaths who had a lot of with a group of, but in general, that's where that balance is. But just like we can herd sheep and cows by tricking them into thinking we're the alpha male, instead of the alpha male, the alpha sheep, these corporations, what they do is they fool us into obeying, into just all of a sudden we go in there and we feel like we're in that situation of that hierarchy. But not a hierarchy of 100 people or 50 people, a hierarchy of 10,000 people, of 100,000 people, of a Foxconn with 1 million people working for them. You see what I mean? So it's a trick that they play on us, because those types of hierarchies work in small organizations. But when you expand them out into corporations, it becomes psychopathic, I think.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. They're dangerous. But the only thing is, look at some of the accomplishments of these massive corporations. Sometimes they do create scales.
Oh, I've heard that before. Look, let's say Apple. It wasn't. If that argument was true, you would need an organization and then get the innovation. Usually it's the opposite. You first get the innovation, then they become a corporation or they get taken over by a corporation, and then all the corporation is doing is trying to rehash what they already got and try to knock down the others who threaten them. So I'd say the best innovation and creativity comes when you have a decentralized situation where a lot of people have the possibility to, because if everything was corporation, look at the film industry, that's perfect. The worst films are always from the huge. What are they doing now? They're doing sequence after sequence after sequence of well-tried, like superhero stuff.
Oh God.
When Game of Thrones came, It was innovative. It was something new. And that's always the successes. It comes from the bottom. It comes from the people. It comes from trends. Difference of fashion and trend is that fashion is manufactured from the top. Nobody cares except that little bubble who have the mannequins and the gay designers or whatever. But then you have trends. You remember when the Seattle wave, for example?
Oh, the grunge?
It wasn't a corporation creating that. It was something that really originated in Seattle, and it just became a wave. And that's the difference here. So no, I'm not afraid for the invasion at all. But what I was getting at was the price. Because if I say this medicine is the price is 500 trillion, right? And everybody in the world gets, I have the corona solution and I'll sell it for the world's total economy, okay? Every value in the world. Everybody had to chip together and pay. Wouldn't I have all the money in the world?
But would it be worth it? Or not?
No, that's not the question. I'm trying to understand how this works. This isn't a realistic scenario.
No. But that's how the market works. The market says,
yeah, but there's no such thing as a market. You know that.
No, of course there are markets. Look at take this. I'll give you an example. Take the sports market.
It's rigged, man.
No. Take the sports market. Take a Cristiano Ronaldo. Why am I going to pay him all of this money? Am I making money off paying him this money? Of course I am. They're not stupid. I mean, these guys who pay him money, is Gillette making money to pay him to do advertisements for razor blades? Of course they are. They're not stupid. So what I mean, the market, but there's a point where he could say, I want $1 billion to do a Gillette ad, and they would say, sorry, I'm not making money.
Okay, that's different. Look, okay, let's say it was 100% lethality of corona. Okay, everybody died. Okay, I had. For some magic reason, I had the solution.
The pill, right? You had the pill.
Yeah, I had a recipe of how to, and I say, I'll sell this recipe to the world, but I want the total economy of the world in payment. So they paid me the total economy of the world. Now, how would that work? Wouldn't that be all the money in the world? I'm trying to understand how money works, right? So I'm trying to give you.
That would be all the future commitments to do work in the future.
And then the bank just continue to print money, right? And then that would devaluate all the money I just robbed, wouldn't it?
Well, okay, but what would you do with the money? No, but hold on. You get all the money in the world.
Yeah.
What would you do with it?
Well, I couldn't even possibly start spend as crazy.
But the thing is, you would start spending it.
You
would start spending it.
Yeah, but it would just be like.
You would go out and you'd say, okay, I want to buy Apple. I want to buy this studio. You see what I mean? You would put the money back. You would put those promises of future work back into the economy. And as they started to move around, they call that the velocity of money. As that money that you got began moving around. Imagine you said, I want to buy a studio. And the studio said, yeah, let's make some films. And you said, sure, here's another chunk of money. And they bought paid actors. You see what I mean? And those promises of future work would start to circulate around.
Right.
And as they circulated around, it would get, you see what I mean? It would start to flow again.
Yeah. Okay. What if I just put the money under the world's biggest mattress?
Then you would collapse the entire monetary system, and we'd have to kill you.
But in the modern monetary system, couldn't they just say, yeah, here's all the money in the world. Now go in an island somewhere and sit on that, like Scrooge McDuck.
Oh, I see.
Couldn't the world just continue? Because people would still produce stuff. The banks could still just create money out of thin air. And after 10 years... Hello? Are you there? Damn.
Oh, Al, where did you cut off? Where did we cut off? Because I gave you the answer.
Oh, you did? I think, did you hear me say that I took all the money like a Scrooge McDuck?
Yes. So, okay, let's start from there.
Yeah.
You took all the money in the world and you went to your island and you didn't spend any, correct?
Well, only maybe some bread and butter.
But basically nothing, okay?
Yeah.
From a modern monetary theory standpoint, they would print money immediately and replenish all the central banks, all the companies give money to everyone in the world. And imagine they could do this digitally in a day.
Yeah.
So they gave all the money in the world to you. There was no money in the world. And then they replenished everybody else. And 2 days later, everything would be exactly the same as it was.
Exactly. And that's the difference between the old tied up to gold
right.
and past work economy
exactly.
versus the future is unlimited. This is the difference between a closed and an open economy, basically, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, this is one of the problems with when we look at money in the sense of hard money, real money, work that's already been done. In the wrong hands, that money can completely paralyze an economy. Because imagine the rich stop spending. They stop spending.
Which they often do, actually. Stop investing.
Exactly. Or they spend it on the wrong things.
Yeah.
Imagine they start spending it on art and I don't know, in bottles of wine
and
war instead of factories, innovation.
Yeah.
Then we get an economy. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen in an MMT.
But here's an interesting thing. If my scenario happened, okay, the bastard went. Now let's, get the economy back. People were still working, producing, right? Mm-hmm. And banks printing. Wouldn't that mean that the value of my money went down?
No, it would have as long as you didn't spend it, it would have imagine you waited let's say you waited 3 years, everything got back to normal. Mm-hmm. If everything was the same, your money would have the exact same value. You could actually go back and buy the world. You could buy the world again. But
because people laugh.
What's so interesting?
Laugh of this example, but it's actually a pretty real example because we have a few people who have, or institutions or whatever, who have extremely much money. So I'm trying to understand how they're faring in this paradigm, in this system. Yeah. So let's say, that what you said is true. Now the next day there's a new coronavirus. 100% lethality. Mm-hmm. Or no, not the corona, another virus. Another dude comes and says, hey, I have the cure, but you have to do the same as you did to Al. You have to pay me everything.
So you just do the same thing.
So we do that, and he moves to another island. Couldn't we do this with every person in the world?
As long as you didn't spend your money. But if you started spending money, then we would have inflation.
Okay. I see.
Because imagine, I buy, so they give the banks back the money. The banks go in to buy all these corporations, et cetera, et cetera. And remember, they're buying from you. Oh God, then it gets really complicated how this works. But Al, you got to go out and spend your money.
No, I didn't take over the factories. I only took over the money.
But what's fast? Well, no, you just took the money, not the factory.
Yeah, I didn't take the.
Oh, you did.
The production.
Oh, yeah. Then it would be no problem at all.
Right.
Then that's a very easy problem because all of that money is connected to a debt, right? Mm-hmm. So they just have to replenish that money, and then everything is in balance again. Yeah, wouldn't be a problem at all. But what's interesting about this question is what value does your work have? Because you did do some work, Al. You saved humanity. Mm. And what's the value of that work? No. And in real markets, when markets are working well, and I'm not a libertarian anymore, but I think I believe the market should be an area of our society, a part of our society that we call the market. You walk in the door and that's where the market occurs. And then when you walk out the door, we're in something else.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's the way I see it. Because I love markets. I love like those old European markets, You go in and there are people selling stuff and it's great. There's a nice energy to it. Mm-hmm. But when we say the entire society is one big market, then we've made a big mistake. We've made a big mistake.
Yeah, that's fundamentalism.
Exactly.
I agree. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's not a market. It's not a trade in motivation and experience when you cuddle with your child or your pet, right? But exactly. if you regard everything as money, then you will say, no, it's an exchange of energy, which is kind of correct, but that's not what motivating people. People do stuff for free, man.
Yeah, it keeps them engaged.
Heck, this show is a very bad market solution. in a way. So people do art, whatever, write books. Many people accuse my guests of, they just want to make books and become rich. Hello, which century are you living in? Nobody gets rich from books anymore.
And Al, you know about all those millions I made on my film on the tarot, no? 21
Right,
Faces of God.
exactly. Yeah. So everything isn't a market or commodities.
Harvey Weinstein was going to pay me $100 million, and then they arrested him. There went my money. I could have been on that island.
That's the island with all the money. But we have two big subjects we have to touch. One is, let's go over to UBI, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, I wanna introduce a few ideas here, and then you can take it and run with it. I'd say UBI is... the interesting thing with UBI is that you can argue for it, regardless of your political position, and you can argue against it, regardless of your political position. Now, some people think, it's a lefty idea. No, it's not. In fact, Bernie Sanders is against UBI. And some say it's a right-wing conspiracy. But really, here's the thing. From an economical liberalist, you can talk about the market flexibility. Because if you get rid of the minimum wage, or whatever you call it, combine that with the income being partly liberated from work, then you can do it easier to get the wages down. It will also increase the possibility for those who are outside of the working force. And guaranteed minimum income will also lead to more people being willing to take risks. It will increase the effectivity in the capitalistic economy. And at the same time, it stimulates innovation. This is what I meant when I said I don't need a corporation. I just basically need food in my belly and a roof over my head to have the possibility to be innovative. So a very important effect of UBI is that it will simplify and reduce the public sector. You guys in America are terrified of the public, the big bureaucracies. So it liberates resources and working force. Then you have the social democratic argument, which is that it increases the social security. And it's a very effective mechanism to spread, distribute. Yeah. So it's a very effective way to, a mechanism for distribution, which will, it will finish off poverty. So it will be like a fundamental safety for everyone. And that's what social democrats say they want. Now, from a socialist perspective, you can say that it liberates your stigmatization and clientification. You know what I mean about that?
Yes.
The symbolic gap between someone receiving social contributions and those who finance it. It just falls apart. And, the modern system is so complicated that many won't even achieve getting what they may be entitled to from a perspective of the law, because you just remove the
stigma?
Means-tested benefit.
Okay.
Yeah, it just removes it, right? So nobody is like locked in a social cost. And this effectivization will increase the value of the users. And you go from being a passive client in a impenetrable bureaucracy, and people with low income gets more real choices and bigger freedom. Now, then you have the libertarian view, is that it will finish off the state compulsion. With UBI, the individual is free to choose how it will live its life without interference from the state. Citizens get a fundamental freedom combined with the stimuli to work, because it's no means testing or condition for the UBI. And you also have an argument for, a green argument. You have even feminists. They get, so you're bitching about equality. Well, you get more freedom and more autonomy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what kind of ideology you have, there is an argument for it from all angles, but that also means it's an argument against it from all angles.
Right.
And up till today, or up until Yang, the arguments against it have finished it off. Conservatives, libertarians, social democrats, and socialists have argued against it. Now it's the paradigm has shifted. Now suddenly everybody sees, oh, damn, we need this thing. So now we're all arguing for it from our own perspective, if you see what I mean.
Right.
Isn't that fascinating, huh?
No, yeah, and that was a great explanation. You really nailed it. And I just want to tell you kind of just a quick story. Do you remember a book called The Bell Curve by a guy named Charles Murray? So I was listening to Charles, who's an arch conservative libertarian. He's a brilliant guy though, but he's very conservative. And I never forget listening to an interview with him, and he said, "Yeah, UBI, that's fantastic. It will wipe out all of the basically all the future debts of the government for Social Security, for health care, all the unfunded, they call it unfunded liabilities." He says, "Oh, financially, this is a great," I remember I'm thinking, Charles Murray? Are you kidding me? He's like, "I think at UBI we need," he wanted to give more than Yang. He wanted to give $1,500 a month. So
Friedman was for it too.
Oh, Friedman was for it? Because it is, I think, honestly, there's only one thing I don't like about it. If money is work, there's no work done for the UBI. So why am I giving it to somebody?
Because the mother is still working. Everybody's working.
I would, in an ideal world, I think, but families who have a child, it's not money for free. They're raising a child. So there I see it as, there's an enormous amount of work. That money should be given to the mother of the child, and she decides if she gives it to her husband, if she buys a Gucci bag, it's up to her. Yeah. That's her decision. There I see it.
But there is an sorry, go on.
I just think it needs to have on the opposite side of that ledger, there needs to be something.
Yeah, that's kind of like what Bernie Sanders also thinks. He thinks that you have to sweat for the value. You have to put in the effort to get something back. But here's an argument against it. Not against it, but he's like explaining that problem. And that is that, look, the natural resources in the world. One thing is if I have like a genius idea, an artwork, a book, that's my personal production, right?
Right.
Or I invent something, that's personal production. But most of the money in the world today, not money, but most of the resources in the world today are still primary. So primary resources is like the land, the natural resources, and who owns the globe? Who owns the water? Who owns the air? Who owns the sun? If the crazies, the corporations get their will, they will goddamn end up owning it all and charging us for it. Now, if you go back to a natural perspective, which is, I'm a traditionalist, that's my perspective. Go back to the tribe, whatever, right? We are all a part of this world and we all own it together. Now, if someone ends up owning the oil, for example, then he has to pay off the rest of us. Pay us off. Because when we were infants, he was born next to me in the hospital and the cord was cut at the same time. There was no angels descending saying, oh, this guy is the ruler of the world. He owns the sun, he owns the moon, he owns everything. The water, the air, the land. No, but somehow he managed to get in that position. You see what I mean? Because of, if he was born like 1,000 years ago, he wouldn't. But he was born at the right time, at the right place, so he somehow managed to own everything.
But he did something, Al, that you didn't do.
Oh, no. Are you saying that the CEOs of the multinational corporation are geniuses? No, it's all to do with a lot of stuff. Coincidence, bribes, cheating. No, it's a rigged.
But now you're putting a moral judgment on what they do.
But
if we remove the moral judgment, he did something. He paid off a politician.
Well, he inherited it from his father.
Or take the Russian oligarchs. They basically did a bunch of scams. They were a bunch of scam artists and criminals.
There were bureaucrats who, when they privatized...
Or bureaucrats.
Yeah, most of them were bureaucrats when they privatized the whole thing. Let's say I was appointed by the Soviet to run this factory. And now, under Yeltsin, it's a free-for-all, so now we're privatizing, and the guy who coincidentally was appointed to run the factory took over the factory.
Right.
Now I own it. So you see, I didn't do shit to earn it. Just as the receiver of the UBI didn't do shit. But here's the thing, I'm paying you off. In order for me to own these collective resources that is a heritage for everyone, I have to kind of pay off. Besides, like Yang says, the machines are taking over the work anyway. So are we going to end up with one oligarch eventually and a bunch of machines and everybody else dying off? That's the kind of the alternative. You see what I mean?
And getting back to the oil thing, there's kind of on an esoteric sort of a level. What is oil? If you think about it, what is it?
Blood of the earth.
No. If you really think of it, it's the energy of the sun stored in carbon, smashed down for thousands of years.
Right.
Liquefied. So it's a tree. A tree is a battery of solar energy, right? When you burn the carbon in a tree, when you have a little fire, that's what you're doing. You're burning stored energy of the sun. And oil is just like condensed. It's the great battery of solar energy, right? Who owns the sun? We could say we all have an equal share in the sun.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah.
And so in that sense, when you say it that way, I think it's a good argument. It's a good argument that we all have some share of that oil of everything. And therefore,
why is Norway rich today? Because unlike some other countries, when oil was discovered, we had, a feeling of, I wouldn't call it nationalism, but, well, kind of like a love for our country. So we said, no, we're not going to sell it all off to Mobil and Shell and all these players who was involved in the first drillings. We nationalized the shit, and still today, the majority of the production goes to the state. And that's why we are like the rich Arabian or Gulf states. We're kind of in the same, only we have a completely different system. So I think that's great, because everybody who's born in this country, who is a citizen, it's a part of their heritage. But you don't.
And you have the same right to those 1,000 years of the sun shining on those trees as anybody else. Exactly. And that's a good argument. Yeah.
But that's not practiced in America. In America, it's like who's on top.
Yeah,
he has the right.
Yeah, it's a different. But wouldn't you say maybe that a system like the American one is a bit more dynamic?
Yeah, but because of other things, not because of this exact thing we're talking about now. Of course, I mean, it's the perfect place to, for example, launch innovation. Yeah. Or it used to be. I don't know what will happen. But that has to do with other stuff than what we're discussing now. You could still have that without having all the corruption. In fact, I'd say, like Leonard Cohen says, it's coming to America first. The land of the best and the worst. And that's so true. You have all these good things despite all the shit going on. And that's...
Yeah. No, I mean, of course, you don't get one without the other. But I think you have a dynamic side and you have an incredibly dark and corrupt side. But I think one side feeds off the other. I mean, I think it's hard to separate them. It's when you live it, for example, I have a friend and she was so funny. She always said, when we lived in New York, I lived in Manhattan. No, I worked in advertising. And she used to always say, the narcissists of every country in the world, what do? They always go to the capital of that country, right? If you're a real narcissist, you go to Moscow, you go to Paris, you go to London. They all aggregate in those places. And the narcissists of all of the world, where do they come? They come to New York. We are the narcissists of the world, Bob. And I used to roll down. I could tell you stories about her, for hours. But it always caught me. It's like New York is the magnet of the world for narcissists. It still is.
Yes. I mean, I'm not talking about the old school people who grew up in...
No. We're talking about the Manhattan,
yes. Yes.
Leeds.
No, City of London is a good number 2, and Wall Street, Manhattan is number 1. I agree. A very good observation. Okay. Do you have anything to add when it comes to UBI before we take the last?
Yeah, because I think UBI, when we look at AI and what it's going to do and what's going to happen, we've reached a point where all of that And think of the thousands of years of humans developing themselves from hunter-gatherers to wherever we are, to the point where we can have AI systems that could run massive factories. Shouldn't we get a piece of that? And I think it's a little bit in the same argument. So there I agree with it. The other thing I agree with is it helps people make better decisions, much better decisions. Another good point about it is governments, in my opinion, and this is the American in me, are not great at administrating things. They're good at collecting taxes, spending money, and wars. Governments are great at those three things. Yeah. And in this system, you give the money to the people and you let them decide.
Exactly.
Who's a good doctor? What is good medicine? What is good food?
And they put them right back into the system.
Exactly. Instead of having like the Bill Gates model where I own Microsoft, make me $1 gazillion, and then I start the Bill Gates Foundation, and I tell you what your kid should study.
And charity.
No. The American in me says, show me the money, give me the money, Bill, and I'll figure out how to spend it.
Yeah, screw charity. Yeah.
The UBI model in that sense, and making better decisions. Yang talked about this, and it's so true. I'm sure you've had moments in your life, I've certainly had them, when you are just in a bad spot. And when you're in those positions, you don't make good decisions. But when you've got your nut covered, pardon the French, you're able to think logically and create better family situations. And, UBI will be good for the family, because if you got a guy who's making $1,000, his wife gets $1,000, together they've got $2,000.
And crime will plunge.
Crime will plummet, and it will push people to stay together. Instead of a woman saying, "Oh, my husband left me, I don't have enough money, give me a check." No. It's everyone gets their check. You guys figure it out. It'll create I think it'll help the family. So it's the arguments against it. There's that one thing I really don't like about there's no value created, but I could live with it.
Yeah, but again, from a strict economical perspective, yes, because the system you're currently in has defined what will have a value, right? But like you actually pointed out in part 1, you said that there are work being done that is not valued and not integrated and not monetized. And nobody is going to sit in their sofa and wither away if they don't have to wear diapers at our Amazon factory. If they actually get enough, $1,000 is probably not enough, but if they get enough UBI, let's say they got a decent so that they didn't have to worry. Oh my God, people would do a million things. Yeah. A million things. Just think about, everybody thinks that all the other people wouldn't, but of course I would. So you who listen now, if you didn't have, if you have a career and everything is great, I'm not talking about you, but you who are either stuck in a rut, poor, whatever, if someone said, now you can do whatever you want, and here's what you're going to get every month. You think they would sit on their ass all the time? No, they would start living life. Even if they didn't even produce anything, which most people would one way or the other, they would still partake in the economy. Even if they were partying all the time.
Yeah. And Al, but one thing also, we have all of this technologies. We have become so productive. Why are we still working 50, 60 hours a week? I think with the UBI, people would say, you know what? I want to work. I want to be part of a group. I want to be in an organization. I want to create things. But how about 4 days a week, 6 hours a day?
Yeah.
That's
almost, it's not as good in Norway, but we work much less than you.
Yeah.
Normally, I think it's, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. But here's the thing. There's an argument for it even for a country like ours. Like here, if you are poor here, if you're unemployed, the state will give you about $2,500 a month. But we have a very complicated security net. We have like a million different kind of things and huge bureaucracy, stigma and everything. So if we just removed all the different social securities that we have and implemented UBI, we would save so much more. And that's what they don't get. They think UBI is spending money. It's actually saving a lot of money. In fact, studies and implementation of it has shown We've just been discussing the end of it, the user end, but you can also look at the issuing end, and it's very effective. It's the same kind of situation with healthcare. People think that universal healthcare, you can't do that in America because it's so expensive, and Joe Biden lies about that because he's paid by the big pharma and the big insurance. But in reality, and you don't have to implement Bernie's version. Bernie's version is the centrist version, actually. It's pretty close to what we have. Medicare for all, that saves $500 billion a year just by getting rid of the bureaucracy. Plus, it saves 70,000 lives. Now, we had a poll. It was very interesting. We occasionally do that because I want to see where people's at. And I illustrated the 5 different healthcare systems. You have NHS, which is the real left-wing version. That's what they have in UK. And that's publicly run and financed. The other option people could vote for was Medicare for All, which is privately run but publicly financed. That's Bernie's version. It's kind of centrist left. Then you have centrist right, which is Healthcare for All, which is Tulsi's version. Privately run, publicly financed, plus private insurance add-on. And then you have the public option, which is the real right-wing version, which is private insurance market plus public insurance add-on. All these 4 are universal healthcare, and all 4 gives you free at the point of service if you can't afford. And some of them give free at the point of service to everyone. Now, in America, they have the 5th option, corporate dictatorship, I call it. And that's just private insurance exploitation, where you have this mafia middleman that has nothing to do with healthcare, creating huge bureaucracy, trying to profit of it without producing anything, trying to stop paying out as much as possible, and driving people bankrupt. So that's the corporate model.
Definitely.
And that's what you have today with I guess it's called Obamacare. Now, some people said that there used to be a way in America that was better. But I don't think that was universal anyway. But guess what people voted for?
The Bernie model.
No.
Which one did they want?
I expected everybody to actually vote for Medicare for All.
I voted in that because I saw that on my YouTube and I went and I voted.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think I voted for the Bernie model.
Yeah, okay. No, I was shocked. 44% voted for NHS.
Oh, really?
Publicly run and publicly financed, yes. And remember, half our audience are Americans, so that means that even Americans want that. 13% voted for Medicare for All, Bernie's version. 18% voted for Tulsi's version. And 18% for public option, which is the establishment. That's like when the establishment concedes. When they eventually go off the corporate model you have, that's what they want to go to because it's like the shortest step.
But I just wanted to explain one thing that a lot of people don't understand. But do you know why we have the system we have in America? Because it's sort of an interesting story.
No. Pray tell.
Why do the Americans have such a weird system? And it all goes back to the Second World War. So before the Second World War, healthcare was just private. You paid doctors. You went to the doctor and you paid him. Right. That's how it worked. Right. During the war, people in the States worked for the arms companies, building the guns and all these sorts of things. But there were laws where you couldn't raise the salaries to stop inflation because the Second World War was the perfect example of MMT, just spend money like crazy. So they put price controls on wages. So what the arms producers, the industry did was they gave people benefits. They couldn't give them more money, so they gave them benefits. And they gave them health insurance. It was something they invented to compete in the marketplace where they couldn't give more money. So when the war ended, people didn't want to give that up. And so that's why we got stuck in this weird place. But it all goes back to companies giving people health insurance. And we had a tradition for a long time where, like when I worked at UPS, I had unbelievable health insurance. And everybody at UPS, we had 300,000 employees, had great health insurance. You see what I mean? That there was a time when it actually worked okay. But then everybody got greedy, and it turned into a big disaster.
Isn't it the same with the economy that once upon a time, I think you said it in part 1 that there were different valutas. Is that the word? Different monies. Ron Paul argues, and I've always been sympathetic to this, but I don't know enough to know if it's actually sound. But he says, ideally, there should be no defined, like anything should be valid money if people agree about it. Because we have here in Norway, we have like exchange rings where I offer one service to you, you offer one back. And fish, herring, if you want herring to be, go ahead, gold, silver, diamond, whatever you want. Now, is there an argument against it? I mean, I think intuitively it sounds ideal.
But the only thing is, in that system, some banks, there would be competing monies. But the only problem there is, how do you pay taxes? Because the system now is there's only one money, and that's the money that you pay taxes in. In Ron Paul's system,
but we don't even need to pay taxes.
Exactly, the government there would have to be one currency that the government would receive taxes in. And that's the only kind of fly in the ointment of that system. Because I mean,
does it have to be taxes? Can't it be like a fee or something?
But how do you value the fee? Is it the government?
For example, if you just kill the income tax and instead you put tax on, let's say, profit or something.
But in what currency? You see what I mean? A percentage of what?
Right.
You
need an objective value. Right.
Now, he would probably say, in the end, the government could decide which currency it thought was best, and then you would convert your currency to that currency and pay it. But that's the only problem with that. But that idea is good because some banks could just print money like crazy. Some would only lend deposits, and people would decide what currency they thought was best. It's like a forex market going on within a country.
But if a bank did it like crazy, wouldn't they gobble everything up?
Right. And people would not want their money. Their money would lose value. And people say, I don't want those. I don't want those Al dollars. I want the Bob dollars.
Right. I see. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating. Ron Paul, the only thing about Ron Paul is he is like, he's a dogmatist. He never occasionally says, it's like a religion with him. I just think you have to be a little bit more flexible.
Yeah. Both him and Bernie are very stuck to their ideas. That's why people love them too, because they're principled, right? But Ron Paul is very misunderstood because all the arguments like, you don't care, you want to do this overnight, everyone will die. He said many times, actually, no, I would obviously want to phase it over. I don't want to put people out of no health care and, poor people on the street, no money. He says, because the system is so rigged and screwed up today, in order to get to where I want, we would have to spend a long time and make sure that we had now you can say, but in reality, well, that's a different matter if they managed it. But his idea was to try to protect people and give them time to adjust to the new system.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of, a real dogmatist wouldn't care because, no, my ideas are right, so I'm not flexible enough to try to adapt them and adjust. So he showed there that, no, he has a heart. It's just that people misunderstand. They take the extreme of libertarianism. It's the same they do with socialism, right? They take extreme, Nicaragua, whatever, right? Venezuela.
Yeah.
And they try to just use that to debunk an actual argument or an actual idea. And I think the same was happening to Ron Paul. Paul and Bernie, they're so similar in so many ways. They're just in different ideologies. And I think I've always said, look, all system works. It's not like one system is working and another isn't working. All system works. It's just you have to decide which system you want. What is your values?
Yeah.
Because there will be pros and cons.
And that's the issue. Yeah. The American system is a hybrid of a state-run system, so you have corruption. We would have a much better healthcare system if it was 100% private. At least the market would work. But no, they regulate doctors. They regulate this. They regulate that to keep the prices up. I mean, Obamacare was written by the health industry. So it's all a big scam.
Yeah, insurance.
Yeah. I mean, if we had a 100% private system, it would be much better than the system we have now.
Are you talking about privately run or privately financed?
100% like food. If we had a healthcare system that you want healthcare, you buy it. The government does not intervene. It would be so much better and so much cheaper than it is now. Our healthcare system is the most expensive in the world.
But it would have to be decentralized, right?
Absolutely. There could be no regulations. Anyone, for example, doctors from Poland could come to America and practice medicine.
Right.
There would be no regulations. You would have cheap, good medicine.
But FDA has been around.
What a mafia that is.
Yes, and that's regardless of how you finance it, right? They are the problem. They are the regulators.
The American Medical Association. To be a doctor in America, you have to study for 15 years. No. You want to be a doctor? Anyone can be a doctor. The market will decide who are good doctors and bad doctors. That's the Ron Paul system. And his system would work. But the transition would be horrendous. To go from where we are to that, I wouldn't want to live through that, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Right. But the final product, because when my father was a doctor, in most of his, just like a local, before he became an anesthesiologist, he worked as a private physician. It was all cash. People come to your house, got a broken arm, $300. Here you go, fix your arm. I mean, that's the way it worked. And people found the money, and, the prices were normal. I mean, you break an arm today, it's probably $5,000 or $10,000. You know what I mean? Then it was like, $100, here you go. And you can't pay. What's my father going to say?
And
no.
Most of it is bureaucracy.
Guys would come and pay in chickens. They would pay in this. I'll pay you next month. You know what I mean? It was like a regular business. It was like the fruit stand. You know what I mean? It was not corporate business. Negotiation. Come on, give me a break. I got 3 kids. You know what I mean? Try that, because it was you and a doctor, and that was it. It was a different world. Yeah.
It was. And we are in one very important thing that makes our world different is the sci-fi factor, as I call it. And Hayek, Friedman, Keynes, Marx, none of these economic analysts could foresee it. And now enter the black economy, because this is a part of the, is such an important, because let's go back to my monopoly example. And maybe I'm way off, but I've been thinking, because I didn't calculate this brilliant thing about the future that you introduced. I only calculated the space, not the time. But I was thinking, what's going on today is that they are printing as much money as they want. In other words, the guy who's pointed out to be the bank, let's say Alex Zakiris, you, me, Alex, and Miguel.
Alex always gets all the money.
Yeah, he's the one who's at the bank, right? And you, me, and Miguel are fighting around the monopoly board. Now, Alex goes and he gets like 100 other monopoly game money from there. He seeds it into our game. We don't know. But why isn't there inflation? Why isn't everything, if we go from having $100 each to having $10,000 each, we all could afford this thing, right? But then, prices goes up because, they all can afford it.
Because the resources haven't increased at all.
No, but here's my point. I'm not done. So that's on the right hand, he's seeding all this money. But if this is going to be a metaphor for today, then you have most likely the classified space program, which is where all the money is going. So how can they finance it? Because in the one way, they take all this money, flushes it through our economy, and then there's the black hole at the end of the economy, where all this money is going out again. And so that's why the hotels and the houses are not rising in price, because all the money is going out on the other side and into this huge space manufacture. If some people listening have no idea what I'm talking about, go check our shows with Catherine Fitz, former housing commissioner, former secretary of housing, HUD. So she's telling how this works. And I think that's what she was getting at. I had a hard time understanding the economic aspect, but it seems to me, yes, they're flushing limitless money in, but then they're also tapping limitless money out.
That's what I've listened to her in many of her interviews, and that's what I got from her was that the other side of the ledger So they're for example, let's just take the 21 trillion that I'm sure most of your listeners know about.
It's higher now, though, but yeah.
Okay, but I remember the 21 number. What's on the opposite side of that ledger? What's the asset? And the asset, I think, what she was saying was actually this technology. I think what she was referring to was this, and it does seem clear that it looks like some of this technology has come to us from other places. No, it's out there, and we see it. No, and I think that's what she meant. That once we captured that technology and we said, okay, in 10 or 20 years, if we can decipher how this stuff works, imagine the potential. Let's create 21 trillion on one side, but we can't go to Congress and say, oh, we've captured a UFO and there's some stuff in there we don't get. But once we figure it out, we'll be flying to Pluto, for the weekend. So they create this money and then they sneak it through, and that's the black money.
So it's a whitewash of...
It actually all makes sense in a way.
But she's saying, and many others are saying, that it's not just that they're looking at technology. They actually, Trump's Space Force, that's just a whitewash of what's been going on. They're finally going to integrate it seems. So they've had these huge manufacturing projects, completely black, and they already are flying to Pluto. But they probably have means to exploit resources in our solar system, but they can't when they reach that level, they have to integrate it with the world economy, right? Because
imagine, let's take the example of a technology that could go to Mars and mine Mars for a mineral. Well, at some point, it's perfectly fine. And there's zero inflation. If I create $21 trillion and I go to Mars and I find $21 trillion worth of minerals. And I think that's what she was getting at.
That's my point with the monopoly thing. So that's why it's not inflation, because yes, they pump Alex, he throws all his money in, but then, it doesn't work here with the monopoly because there's no space program in the monopoly. Here's how you could do it with the monopoly. Imagine Alex takes a chunk of that money, but then he adds a chunk of board from one of the other boards. He goes, okay, guys, I'm going to dump in another chunk of money, and there's another street with new hotels that you can buy. Then there's no inflation. Moon Street, Mars Street, Pluto Street.
Exactly. That's
I think that's what's going on, Pentagon.
Isn't it weird that all this UFO stuff with the disclosure, and it was December 2018. I remember I was like, what is going on with this? And it all seems I have a feeling that all of this financial stuff, this coronavirus stuff, and it's all gonna, on the other side of this tunnel, I think there's going to be some very, very interesting revelations.
Yeah.
I do have that feeling that there's something good on the other side of this. Hopefully.
Yeah. Again, from your mouth to the ears of the gods. So wouldn't the powers that be able to do whatever they want of projects in the black, as long as modern monetary theory is practiced? I mean, there would be no checks and balances.
Now, one thing that we have to be clear though. Modern monetary theory is not a policy; it's an interpretation. And there are libertarian sides to it. And you see what I mean? It's not a policy. It's a way of looking at how money is created. It's very important, especially that idea I told you about, that governments create money, spend it, then collect taxes. That's not traditional economics. So this is just a way of interpreting how money is created, how governments spend money.
Isn't it an analysis of what's going on?
Yes, exactly. That's it. It's an analysis. And just so if any of your listeners are kind of a little into policy, go check out Stephanie Kelton's paper. There's a very famous paper she wrote in the late 90s, and it's very easy to read. It's about 20 pages. I've read it. I'm not an economist, but I understood it. And she makes the case. And you'll see in MMT that there are people, it tends to be used by the left, but there are people on the right who also use it as a way of interpreting how money is created and how governments function.
Mm.
But yes, there are no limits. The only limits are our capacity, is our potential.
Right. Back to what you said. Yes.
That's the limit. And so politicians should always say, if we said we want to grow 1 trillion tons of potatoes, the politician shouldn't say we don't have the money. He said, we don't have the capacity.
Or the resources.
I'm sorry, the resources. We don't have the resources to do that. But if there's farmland that's not being used, and there's water that's not being used, and there are seeds that are not being, and there's people
who doesn't have anything to do,
you can create that money, grow those potatoes, pick them, and it's not inflationary because you're creating an asset.
Right.
So it's the resources. And that's why when we talk about scarcity, the scarcity of money and the scarcity of resources are not the same. And people think they are. They think money,
that's right,
all of the money equals all of the resources. That is not true.
Mm.
So modern monetary theory allows us to open up our resources. But you know what the problem of MMT will be is the green side. Because they're going to say, with MMT, we're going to go full bore. We would have very, very important economic growth, and consumption would increase. This is, I think, undeniable. And is this good for—
Hang on. Why would consumption? Because people are lifted out of poverty? I mean,
exactly.
I can't eat 3 times more than I already eat. So why would it—
No, but I mean, you can buy more clothes, you can buy more telephones, travel more.
Yeah, but there's a limit to, I mean—
But Al, think about how much more.
Look, if I had 100 times more money, I wouldn't buy 100 times more clothes. Maybe some lunatics would do that, but I have enough. Like, I would probably use it for stuff that I can't afford now, but that could mean like take a weekend trip to Japan, for example.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but look at China. China is a country that was underdeveloped in before 1990. And after 1990, after Deng Xiaoping decided this new form of Chinese socialism, think of all of that contamination.
Oh, green. Okay. You mean pollution?
Yes.
Right.
So I think there's a part of the green movement that's going to be very much against this because it's gonna there's gonna be more consumption.
But it's happening already, so they have to understand it before they can be against it. So what would they suggest?
Yeah, but the scarcity argument is we're running out of resources, we're destroying the earth. Right. We have to, you see what I mean? They're going to go and say, no. If we give people the money and they decide they're going to go out and buy iPhones and go traveling around the world and going to Thailand and doing God knows what, we have to give them the house, give them the food. You see what I mean?
Mm.
You remember you talked about why a lot of the socialists are against it because it gives the power to the people and away from the state. The green movement in general is pro-state. It's against the people.
Authoritarian.
Exactly. It's oh my God, it's that. Mm. So that would be an argument against it from especially the environmentalist side.
Yeah, they're very stuck in the scarcity model. They're not calculating that they think there is finite resources, and if that's right, they are right. But we know it's not finite because it's infinite in time, meaning future projections. Mm-hmm. The debt is basically put on the future, as I understand it, and there's limitless also in space, as long as we have the means, the resources to go to space, right? So in both
space. Remember, there is no debt. There is no debt.
So let's address that too, because money as debt is, you saw that movie, and it's kind of the same thing they say in Zeitgeist. So isn't the whole banking system based on debt, the notion of... Because when you go back in time, at some point they introduced negative money. Negative numbers. And as soon as that became a reality is when the debt system started. That's how I understand it.
Okay, but this is really important to understand. In MMT, there are 2 types of money. There's commercial bank money. That's when you go to the bank and you get a mortgage. That money is created, and when you pay back the debt, it's destroyed. Okay? So you create money and you destroy money. High-powered money is the money that governments create. So take the Reagan era. Remember Reagan became president and he just started spending money like crazy, created enormous amounts of debt. And what happened? They expanded the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. They sold all these bonds to the Saudis and all these people. They never paid back that debt.
But isn't that devaluating everybody's money?
No, because that money was creating resources. It only devalues money when you buy existing assets. So if that money, for example, think about it this way. If all the money that's created only goes to buy stuff that's already been built, so we go to paintings. Let's say we go to buy paintings. If we create money to buy paintings, the only thing we do is drive up the price of those paintings. But if we go out and buy paintings of new artists, then it's not inflationary because they're creating art and we're creating money to buy the art. You see what I mean?
So in reality, they're obviously not spending this on new artists. So how do they get rid of the devaluation factor?
Why have we avoided consumer inflation over the last 20 years? Is that the question? Because it's an interesting question.
I guess I have to put it in my own layman terms. Okay. So I'm thinking, I'm trying to wrap my mind around why isn't it that when they are printing as much money as they want, why isn't that making your dollar and my dollar in our pockets less worth?
Because all of the money that they were printing with quantitative easing, with the last round, all of that money went into existing assets like the stock market. Now, the S&P was at 660 in 666, very interesting number, in March of 2009, and it peaked at 3,400. So that's how many times? Almost 6 times. So there was an enormous amount of inflation in existing assets. But the working people, what do? We buy, T-shirts, potatoes, and a couple beers, right? That money was not going to buy T-shirts, potatoes, and beers, and so there was no inflation on that level. That money went all to the top. It didn't get spent. It barely trickled down to keep us alive. Enough trickled down to keep us going, but not to cause inflation, at all.
So it's so hard to. I mean, if someone just prints money as much as they want, I just don't understand why it doesn't devaluate the because
it will.
Okay, money is not tied to resources; it's tied to future resources, right?
Future will.
But that means that they are kind of putting the debt in the future.
Yeah, they're saying that. But remember, that's why I wanted to say there was 2 types of money that was created: commercial bank money. That money's created and paid back. People work in the future and they pay it back. That money is not inflationary. It can cause cycles, but it's not necessarily inflationary. But when governments print money like quantitative easing, that caused asset inflation and made the super rich mega rich. It all went to them. It all went into their pockets. Now, if you look at the inflation in high-priced homes, art, the stock market, the bond market, all of these things, there was an enormous amount of inflation. Enormous. That's why when we talk about inflation, we have to be careful because there's inflation and there's inflation. You see what I mean?
So what can we do to the 0.1% just getting more and more of the resources? Is there some way from our modern monetary thinking that we can balance it out a little?
The coronavirus. What the coronavirus is doing is saying, wait. What is really of value? Ventilators, masks, food, shelter.
Hand sanitizers. Damn, that stocks I regret I didn't buy.
But real things. And these crazy assets, the price of Facebook, take a look at the price of Facebook. You see what I mean? So what it's doing, it's giving us a reality check and saying what is real and what is not real. And what is not real is going to lose value. And what is real is going to gain value. And that value is, you can't go to a bank and say, I want a respirator. You can't go to a bank and say, I need 100 million masks tomorrow. The banker's going to look at you and go, I don't know how to fucking make a mask, right? This is this reality check that we can't let this moment pass us by. I know there's going to be a lot of suffering and it's going to be difficult. And I'm in a country where the suffering, God, I really hope this isn't as bad as they say it is, because there's going to be suffering. But on the other side, we can't let this moment by without at least having it change the way we look at what money is, what work is, and what is true value. What is true value? And those three things, if we can reevaluate that when we come out of this, we can have a much better world.
Yeah, amen to that. Okay, have we said all there is to say about this, or?
Yeah, I think so. I would encourage folks, if they're really interested in modern monetary theory, go to Reddit. There's a Reddit, a subreddit, which is MMT, and you can find a lot of resources in there. And there's some really good people in there who can, if you've got questions, you can ask it in there. It's something you have to spend a little time with. But remember, this is, today on the news, I was listening to Joe Rogan. He basically talked about MMT. And then I sent you that link yesterday from and they were talking
The Hill TV.
Yeah, from The Hill TV, MMT.
Jimmy Dore. If Jimmy Dore can understand this, then there should be hope.
I love Jimmy Dore. He's a great guy. But yeah.
Yeah, me too. I didn't mean to put him down. He says this himself. That's the point. Yeah. But I think all he cares about is that it debunks where's the money to pay for it.
Don't let them say that again, please. If you get one thing from listening to, if you've gotten this far, listen to all of this. First, God bless you. Second, maybe have a drink. And third, please remember, don't ever let a politician say there's not enough money. He can say there's not enough resources, but don't ever let him say there's not enough money.
I'm not sure I got this far, but I'm going to listen to this show and hopefully I'm going to get it. So, yeah.
Actually, I'm making a film on this now. This is my next film. And
talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm making a new film, and part of it is on the body, the mind, and the soul. And the section on the body, I only talk about money. So what is it, and how it functions in society. And now with this whole coronavirus thing, I have to kind of rework it to put that in.
You have to update.
So I've got more editing to do, and hopefully, God willing, I'll have this thing finished before the election.
and you being into astrology and stuff, you know that cycles. It's so interesting because many spiritual people, quote unquote, have succeeded. I'm not talking about New Agers, but if you go back in time, for example, there was this, what's his name again? One of these guys who, like 100 years ago, he had cracked the Bacon Code and he used it for money purposes.
Okay.
Very interesting. He wrote a book. Petter Amundsen told about him where he put down the clue to how he succeeded. And he was into stocks and stuff. And he was studying cycles. And he found
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yes. And they still they even sell software today that uses that theory. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but the problem is that lots of these theories there is a metaphysical component to all of this. I'm saying metaphysical, not non-physical, but cycles are not determined by stuff.
Right.
Everything happening on Earth is effects. Cycles are of a higher causation that manifests in this world of affects, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the whole clue is to try to understand the causation thing. Astrology is basically that. Astrology is a study of cycles.
Cycles.
Yes.
It's the study of cycles.
Yes, but
that's why I began this talking about the generational theory of Strauss and Ho.
Right.
The fourth turning. I didn't start with astrology because I didn't want to turn off the economists, but it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you see it that way. And what's very, very interesting is the millennial generation that is going to have to confront this crisis. You know what their equivalent is? It's the generation that went off and fought the Second World War. That heroic generation.
Jeez.
It's hard to imagine that the millennials, that's who they are, but that's their destiny.
Yeah.
And this could be their moment where they have to step up and show us that they've got what it takes. It's very interesting to look at it like that. We are the Gen X people like me. We're the Gen.
Are you the Gen X too? Me too.
I'm a Gen X. Yeah. So we were.
You must be in the beginning of the Gen X, but we are in the middle. But the boomers are the fat cats and the pigs at the trough who's gotten everything for free and surfed through this thing and then run it to the ground. So I guess they are those who profited from the 20s then.
And they will be the victims of this.
Really, the boomers?
Well, of course, the coronavirus is going to.
Oh yeah, that's karma, man.
They're the victims of this. It's. I hate to say that because I know a lot of boomers that I really like, and let's face it,
we all have boomers in our family.
I was born in the 1967, and that was a great moment. I mean, there was something just incredible about that.
Yeah, they had a moment then.
Yeah,
but they screwed it up.
Definitely had their. But yeah, they're going to be the victims of this, and the millennials are going to be the ones that this is their moment to be heroic. Because this generation, as strange as it seems, as hard as it to imagine, from a cyclical point of view, this generation is heroic. The millennials, they're at a moment where they're going to have to show that they've got grit and that they can go out and storm the beaches of Normandy, so to speak. And so it's kind of hard to imagine, but let's hope they can do it.
Yeah, we're counting on them. Well, they have us Gen Xers to advise them, like we did today.
It's not an easy thing advising millennials.
No, but it's not an easy thing having learned from the boomers either. So some sympathy we can demand for that. No, I don't mean to put down neither. We're all individuals at the end of the day, but and we're all in the same goddamn sinking boat. So
yeah, it'll be a challenge, but we'll get it done.
Yeah. No, neither you nor me have anything to complain about in this situation compared to many others. So
exactly. I'm knocking on wood, I can't complain.
Yeah.
And it's such a, one, just to finish up, but one thing that I find, I studied history. I was a history major at University of Florida, which is it's a reputable university. It's not, I have a master's degree from Boston University. I never was taught how money is created or what it is. I had to work at a bank and just poke and poke and poke, and no one could answer. And I had a friend who was a CFO of an oil company. He didn't know. And so it'd been eating at me for years until I finally cracked the nut. It's not easy. You can work at a bank and not know this.
Isn't it a truism that many of the so-called experts have no idea? I mean, especially those in the mainstream media, those are the ones who didn't see the last bubble coming, and they were promoted, just like the guys who said, "Oh yeah, the Iraq War was fine." They got promoted.
Look at Krugman. Do you know Krugman at the New York Times? Yeah. He won the Nobel Prize in economics.
Yeah,
he got in a debate on his blog with an Australian economist, on whether banks actually create money, and he lost the argument.
Yeah, he's an idiot. And what about Alan
Greenspan?
Yeah. He's a Keynesianist. He had to admit we were wrong.
But remember, he comes out of that Chicago school, so he was influenced a little bit by free. He was actually an Ayn Randian too.
Oh wow!
So he wrote a paper on gold in the 1960s that if you go into these gold bug websites, like these very libertarian gold bug websites, they always pull that paper up, where he talks about how the only real money is hard money, gold, silver, etc.
And he just turned 180 degrees.
Yeah. He just went. But the thing about him is he knew exactly what he was fucking doing.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
Catherine Fitz said the same thing.
He was not stupid.
No.
There was not a stupid bone in that man's body.
There was no mistake, as Catherine Fitz said.
No.
But he claimed, we were mistaken, we were wrong.
He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew.
Criminal bastard.
And Bernanke was, Bernanke was a good student of his, so, he was no idiot either. Yeah. Stuff.
Well, maybe we'll have a show about abolishing the feds.
Yeah, we could definitely.
We didn't touch that.
I know.
So
when I finish this film, I'll send it to you, and then maybe we can do. It won't be till I don't think November, but
okay, I'll promote it to my people.
And we could do. I think they would like it. You'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll have to see the film first and get educated in it. So yeah, send me the link. Now I'll try to get this this show up.
Yeah, this is a timely show. I think
it is. It is. If it comes out a year or two from now, it's kind of.
If you can get this thing out in like the next week.
No, we're having a marathon now, trying to get. We release a lot of new YouTube shows.
Cool.
But what I'll do, come April, that's just a week from now. So I'll get it out, it's the first show in April, to our subscribers. Yeah. And then I'll probably be able to get it out on YouTube it takes time to make a YouTube. I mean, I can totally flush it out on my podcast channel.
Oh, cool.
As soon as I get it out to my subscribers, everything will be the same in May, right? Plus, people won't magically understand modern monetary theory in May anyway. So it's still timely to get it out in May.
Yeah.
The main title is going to be The Money Game.
That would work. But if you can make the title with MMT and the coronavirus, those two keywords, I think.
Yeah, that was my plan.
When people make that connection,
that was my plan for the subtitle.
Yeah, couldn't you use that?
Yeah,
because everyone's going to say it's a good. I think it could work from a keyword level.
Yeah, you understand?
Yeah. The money game, MMT and the coronavirus, that could work really well as a title. It would be MMT and the coronavirus.
You know what? The money game, MMT, UBI,
and the money game, so it's MMT, UBI, and the coronavirus. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's be fine. But if you can put it, because those YouTube and like, for example, if you can put that on YouTube itself will generate suggested views. I think tons of it, shitloads of it. If you connect MMT and COVID-19 in the title, you'll get just from random people who've never been on your who know who you are will start watching it. You could get a lot of new users.
Yeah, that was when YouTube was an open market. Check my show with Cliff High. He tells you how they rigged the whole goddamn YouTube.
They still use that algorithm for their own purposes to make money. If it makes them, you know what I mean? It still makes them money.
Yeah, but they're trying to do it with mainstream instead of independent. The show with Cliff High, I think it would interest you, is called, what's it called? It's called, it's not out to the public yet. It's called Digital Secrets. No, Secrets of the Digital World.
Yeah, his shows are so popular too, huh? People love Cliff High.
Yeah, he's some kind of crypto guru, so money, I think he should understand. Honestly, I don't understand the crypto thing.
The crypto thing?
Yeah, I don't understand it. I feel like a boomer when it comes to crypto. I haven't even managed to set up. A million people have asked us, "Hey, I want to donate crypto. I can't donate anything else." I don't even know how to set up a crypto account. I'm completely clueless, and I don't have time to study up on it. Cliff tried to explain it to me.
If you had only done that a couple of years ago when you started accepting crypto, you'd be a millionaire by now.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. How long have you been doing this?
15.
No, but like on, on YouTube and all this stuff.
2015.
Oh, 2015. A little bit late, but still, yeah. I'm sure you'd have at least 100,000. I'm not exaggerating at all, because then people would have given you like $20-$30 in crypto, which would be worth like 3,000-4,000 now. So yeah, you'd probably have at least 100,000 in crypto by now.
Wow. Well, it's nice to have, but I'm not into it for the money. Yeah. I'm eventually going to manage to put up a crypto solution, and we'll see. Okay. Let's hope there's a new spring like you've hearkened.
Yes, and it will come.
Yeah.
Sooner or later.
Yeah, I have that feeling too. For better or worse, it's a bumpy road. We just have to get through it. So, yeah. So let's meet at the other end of the tunnel and do an evaluation.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you a lot for your time and patience, especially with me trying. But I mean, if I can get this, and I'm not very smart when it comes to economy, but if I can get it, then I bet most of my listeners will get it too.
It'll be interesting to see how that works, though, how the video works. That can get it across. I'll be interested to see what they're.
That's going to be interesting, yes.
I hope I was able to explain it in a way that at least understand.
Oh, you did a tremendous job, man.
So.
Thanks a lot.
I hope so. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, same. But kudos to you for your patience. You knew this would be a discussion if someone was annoyed for all my interruptions and hijacking.
It's really important that because and you asked the right questions. It was perfect because those are the questions that the audience is going to have.
Yeah.
And you made it difficult. You pushed me where I had to. No, but that's good because look, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher, so for me, there's pain in the ass questions, and then there are good questions, and you feel them, and your questions were good, and hopefully, I hope they pushed me to give a better answer. I really hope. I think they did.
It's always good as a teacher when you get questions that kind of builds the flow for the explanation. You see what I mean?
Exactly. And sometimes those questions that stump you, you're like, you go, that was a good question. You kind of pause. Those are the questions I like. Yeah. It's not a picky question. You're not like biting my toes.
Yeah, detail trolling.
You're punching me right in the face. That's what you want. You don't want some kid who's like,
I call it detail trolling. Yeah,
exactly.
That's very annoying. But it's always good also to be challenged because you have to kind of think and you have to see how. Get your competence challenged is very valuable, not just as a teacher, just as a human being, but also as a teacher, because it's one thing is to understand stuff. Another, have the ability to translate it to others. And that's where the teachers come in.
You know what the Chinese say? For a teacher to give a cup of water, he needs a barrel.
Exactly. Very well saying. So, okay, man.
Hey.
Thanks a lot for the session today.
Thanks a lot. It was fun.
Yep.
I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Stay safe, man.
You too.
Take care.
Yep. Bye. Thanks again to Robert for his contribution to trying to clarify these mysterious concepts that money is. Now, I've been pondering about this since we recorded the talk, and for my post-pontification speech, I want to share some further reflections with you. Okay, many of you may have wanted a show about the virus crisis, but look, there's a million about it already, and we know too little right now to say anything for sure, okay? What we do know is that this disease will come and go all over the world. It may be 2 years from now, it may be half a year from now, but it will be gone at some point. And yes, it may have done a lot of damage, or it may have been blown up out of all proportions. I recommend you look at the numbers. That's what matters. And so far, it seems the death toll is just twice of the most aggressive influenza. So I think the worst case scenario so far, according to numbers, is 3%. Of course, it hasn't been around long enough for us to know everything for sure, but that's how it looks. But I can tell you one thing for sure, and that's that the aftermath of it is what we've been discussing today. That's the economy. And this hangover will create more deaths than the corona has ever managed. And don't for a minute think that the virus itself created this crash. The crash has been reported. We knew about this. It's been going on since last year, at least the autumn. The central bank have been printing trillions to save the economy, so the bubble had already burst. In fact, I'd say the corona crisis was very timely, very convenient. And there's no doubt it's accelerated and blown the crash out of proportions, obviously, for us normal people. So that's why I don't want to talk so much about that now. I want to focus on something more important, namely the long game. And we may come back with another show on the virus itself, and we may even come back with a show going into depths about how to solve the current problematic situations we're all in, even though I'm going to spin this from the American point of view because the dollar rules the game. And it's, after all, Wall Street and that independent state within London town called City of London are the main players here. So, what do we know? It's clear to me now that money is not automatically the resources available. Obviously it's not. It's a symbol of that energy, and it doesn't really reflect the consummation of those resources. It's more like a potential power or potential access, or how much of the cake you have. Now, if I have a certain amount of money, obviously I'm not using that money all the time. If I used all my current money right now, yes, it would reflect how much of the cake I would have. And then, bam, I would be out of the game. Instead, we're using a little now and a little then, reflecting how much power, how much influence, how much access to these resources we have. If you have lots of money in the bank, it's just the potential of how much power you have, how much access you have to the collective resources. That can change. You can have $1 million in the bank today, and next year that can have been reduced to the value of what's 1,000 today. Because of inflation, devaluations, stuff can happen. Or in normal stable times, you get interest and the worth of your savings increase. In other words, what really increases is your access to the resources. So, if we have two economies, which we actually do have, or two kind of monies, as Robert called it, we have the normal monies, economies that we, the people, are using all the time, which is directly tied up to the resources. We spend a little of it and we earn a little from it. Then you have the overlying state and central bank economy and all the artificial assets, if you like, bonds and stocks and all sorts of securities and games that they are playing at top of our head. And if that was removed overnight, we wouldn't notice it because we're in the normal economy. If that was 1,000,000 times boosted, we wouldn't notice it unless they started to use that power over the normal economy. And when someone creates something, if you use your money to consume, to buy stuff, services, goods, whatever, then you are reducing the cake. If you use your money to invent and create and produce stuff, then you are expanding the cake. So my money can be used to make me more poor by consuming, or my money can be used to make me more rich by investing or creating or expanding, producing. So the same is true for the top. They can put all the money on books and we won't notice it. And then they can, bam, use it to take over assets, already existing energy. And that will stranglehold the economy and make us poorer. Or they can use it to expand the board of the game, if you see what I mean. Invest in new ventures, industries, like the tech bubble. That in the beginning it was really innovation. Now the normal way things are expanded and have been is that we the people expand. We start inventing new stuff, we create our own businesses, etc. That's how economy has grown. Never from the top, always from the bottom. Imagine for a second that I control the printing of money. I print $1 billion, for example. Remember, that's not tied to current resources. It's imagine future power. It's like the future resources. Because the backup of that money hasn't been created yet. It's not tied to goal in the past, to past work, right? It's future work. So in a way, I'm hacking the future. So they give me $1 billion. Then I go and buy existing assets for that money. In other words, actual values of the present. And then I extract profit from that and I pay back the debt, and it's like it never existed. Or they maybe just delete the debt. That's a power grab. That's theft. I don't know if you can see how clear that is, and keep it in mind for later in my rant. You'll see that's actually relevant to what's going on. Now I checked out Richard Werner. That's Werner with an E. Well, actually with two E's. No A. And you should check him out too, because he's, I think Robert said it, he's the one who coined the term quantitative easing. And he's also the first to provide empirical data on how money and economy works. And what he found has debunked so much of the myths that's out there. I'm not just talking about you and me who don't have a clear understanding of this, but the so-called experts, they are way off. Now, the reason this current situation is a direct result of what happened last time. What happened last time is that they eradicated the middle class. And like Robert said, enough dripped down to keep the machine going, but not to make us get out of the rut. We were just becoming more and more slaves. And what was left of small businesses, normal middle class, is now going to be quenched. Because last time, most people got poor, and the top was bailed out. By us, even rewarding the criminals. And when you reward bad behavior, you're dooming it to repeat. America did nothing to review how the people got screwed. In fact, they gave incentives for more screwing. Because imagine if you're one of the CEOs or the stockholders and you represent these corporations. So they do criminal things, they do not get punished, the banks and the corporations. They do unethical things, they do not get punished, they get rewarded. They do not do sound business. You know, it's not capitalism what you have. In capitalism, you have to be sustainable, you have to be viable. If you do well, you get rewarded. If you do bad, you get taken out. It's like a natural regulating system. Nothing of this is going on. This is like a combination of Soviet economy, fascism economy, and crony capitalism, mafia. It's basically a mafia system. It's monopolism. It's corporatism. It's just robbing like vampires, eating up the money. And again, money is power. Power over resources. In other words, power over the system, over society, over the people, over you. So if you were running a company back then, if you were running small business, good luck, you're out of here. If you're running big business, then it's corporate welfare for you. They are the welfare queens. Oh, you didn't plan for a rainy day? Oh, you spent all your money on bonuses and profits? And you even extended yourself and you gambled and you took loans you couldn't really afford, or you bet on loans to fails, etc. No problem. We just print money. In other words, giving you more power over the current system. Even if this isn't taxpayer money, it's still the same principle, because if everybody goes under and the collective gives a lot of free money to one of them, they are coming up on top. It's just a transfer of power. And so here, this is what a depression means. You can take over. In fact, Dylan Radigan said it very well at Jimmy Dore's show. He said it's like you taking all the houses in LA, for example. You reduce the prices by 90% for a week. Then you give all the money to one player, corporations and banks, and no one else gets money. And then you get a week to go on a shopping spree in LA, obviously taking what assets they can that are promising. And then after a week, we reinflate the prices of the houses after you have bought them. That's basically what was going on in 2008-09, and that's what's going on now. This means they would actually want regular busts and crashes. I'm not saying this was like steered and calculated. I'm just saying it's in their interest. Why would they fear? In fact, if they're doing badly in a normal economy, they would hope for a crash. So it just means more robbery, and they own the politicians. And so they are actively restructuring the US economy in a way that consolidates ownership of assets to a smaller and smaller and smaller group in private sector. And using each catastrophe as an opportunity, remember, never let a good crisis go to waste, as an opportunity to use the collective resources, taxpayer money, the mint, printing press, to accomplish this. And they're calling it bailout for the people, which is really corporate welfare, hijacking distressed assets. If it was bailout for the people, it would be done in a different way, and I'll get to that. But the way it's done now, nobody will be able to own a private business. Welcome to social corpocracy at work. Now, modern money theory is not a policy, like Robert said. It's not, you can't be angry at modern monetary policy. It's an analysis of how this works. And this also explains why, it's kind of a Keynesianism we're living in. It doesn't matter anymore, the analysis of Karl Marx, or of Ludwig Mises, or Friedrich Hayek. Because, yes, if we go back to a measure standard like gold, if we tie money up to something tangible, then we could go full Hayek and see how we would be faring, probably much better. But that's not the existence we're in. And that's why modern monetary theory is a good thing, because it shows you what's going on. It also shows you the solutions. I'm going to get to that. But one very important thing it shows you is that you never again must accept the retard slave mantra. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Have you noticed how they always say that when it's something benefiting the people, meaning you? They never say it when it comes to the looting parties of the elites. Did they say that in 08-09 when they bailed out the big players? No. And by the way, bailing them out, don't believe for a second you are bailed out. And when all the money goes to the top, let's say you have money in the bank and you say, oh, it's terrified, my bank will go under. Oh yes, government, bail them out. No, they're not saving you. In fact, they are making whatever savings you had less worth and erodating the assets even more. There's a million ways you could be bailed out. For example, the government could guarantee all citizens savings. No problem. That's been done in history before, and that's cheaper for the government than bailing out the too big to fail and jail banks. Same with corporations. Oh, horrible. Oh, I can't fly a plane anymore if an airline company goes under. Wrong. As long as there's a market for flying in a normal market. In fact, it would be healthy. There would be many small airlines company coming back up. They would compete healthy. Prices would go down, services would go up. And what about, okay, let's say you're already a slave in a corporation. You're working for a huge manufacturer, let's say making cars. You see how that is a detriment to society and freedom, by the way. The more people who are sucked into these corporations, the more they will vote for politicians who defend them, because they themselves are afraid of losing their jobs and thinking, their fate are tied up to the big monsters. But even that is an illusion. First off, if it ever comes to it, you will be the first to be sacrificed. Don't think for a second they wouldn't sacrifice you if they didn't need you anymore. So it's not a safe future. And anyway, it's ruining society. So when they bail out these big businesses, it's very easy. What the government could do is, okay, you need loans. And loans is what they should give, not subsidies as they have done. But you need loans, okay, we have some criteria here. First off, we are going to repossess all companies that fail. Equity ownership in these corporations, meaning if you go out of business and you ask for a handout, the state gives you that and then owns the amount it gives. For example, if it's 50%, okay, then the state owns half. And then, when the company is healthy again, back on its business, profits will be funneled back to the taxpayers. And then, if you're terrified of the collective, the state, owning stuff in the private market, then sell it back to the private market. And again, we get to something back. At least we should get back what we paid, but really we should get back profits too. Because we've turned something that was unviable into something that was profitable. Why should we hand that over on a gold plate to the oligarchs? It's insane. It's talk about socialism. It's corporate welfare. They want socialism for the elites and they want rugged individualism for everybody else. Oh, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But no, not the companies, not the oligarchs. No, you are going to pay for them. They are the welfare queens. So in my country, it's normal that the state actually is involved in the private market in some sectors. And it doesn't even mean that they control the businesses. It's just that they have stocks, they have shares in them and gets profits from them. And the businesses are free to run about as they want. Of course, they have a saying, if you're a shareholder, you have some influence, and that's what totally should be done. Either that, or just let the business fail, which is healthy in a true market economy, or nationalize the goddamn thing, take it over fully, and then, again, sell it in the future when things are back to normal, for example. Break it up. And that's breaking up is, well, we're going to get to that. That's a part of the solution. But this, how are you going to pay for it? Do you remember on March 16, 2017, Trump submitted his request to Congress for $639 billion in military spending for that year? Congress said, no, that's not enough. Poor war industry needs more, even though they can't even use what they have, even though they have wasted 50 trillion, which is the new number of the missing money. So let's give them 55 billion more. In 2019, they got 687 billion. And don't imagine for a second that these billions goes to the troops or something. I know there are some brainwashed who still buys into those memes. No. If anything, the troops are suffering more than ever. No, these are profits. These are money going straight to the oligarchs. And just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, how much is 687 billion a year? And remember, it increases every year. Well, for 70 billion that year, you could all have free schooling on all levels, including college. That's just 7 billion a year. Oh, how are you going to pay for it? Yeah, right. 20 billion would end homelessness. So just for 90 billion, you could get free education. Instead of dumbing people down, you would raise them up. But who wants informed citizens when you're in a looting party like this? And crime would go down, health would improve. Again, these are economical sound things. I'm not even arguing from a moral perspective. I'm just saying these would be good elements in your economy instead of a detriment to economy, which it is now. But no. What about healthcare? Well, today, America is the most expensive healthcare system in the world. You use $10,700 per capita. Just to compare, Canada spends $4,800 per capita with Medicare for all. UK, which is socialism, healthcare, publicly run and publicly financed, just use $4,200 per capita. So less than half of what you're spending today. Why? It's obviously why. Because the mafia needs their money. And to use Medicare for all, which isn't the only solution, which would offer universal health care free at the point of service, but it's very studied because of the Bernie Sanders pushing it in the race, and so we know a lot about it. Many studies, even done by libertarian and conservative sources, and they all agree. It saves 500 billion annually. 500 billion. That's money you could use again. You would have free healthcare at the point of service, free schools at the point of service, and housing for everyone. And you would be in the exact same situation as now, economy-wise. Well, not now, but right before it all bursts. And to give you an idea of the measures we're talking about here, $1 million, you have like a vague idea of how much that is, right? What you could do with $1 million. That's like a dream for many people. Well, 1 billion is 1,000 million. Nobody would even expect they could ever get up to 1,000 million. But 1 billion is 1,000 million. And so, how much is a trillion? Well, that is 1,000 billion. Okay? 1,000 billion is 1 trillion. It's just, you can't imagine these kinds of money. You better see, you can go online and see how much it is in terms of visual representation of different illustrations that helps you. Now, the world's collective white economy, I say white because the black is bigger, but the white economy is 50 trillion per now. And as we're speaking, they are printing 1 trillion a day to prop up the banks and the stock market. 1 trillion a day. And this is a power grab. This means that the recipients of this money get all the power. It's gonna create the biggest wealth gap the world has ever seen. And we were being hopeful in the show because when we recorded it, there was all this talk about bailing out the people because of the corona scare. And it was talk about treating people for free for corona, basically meaning universal healthcare free at the point of service. Although I just read about someone getting a bill of $30,000 in America for corona treatment with underlying ailments. But of course, too good to be true. They are exploiting this situation. People don't know what's going on and everybody is isolated in their homes. And the looting party is on. Very irresponsible politicians, obviously, because they work for the oligarchs. You have money in politics, meaning politicians are paid. What do you think you get when you have legalized bribes? Obviously, everything that will come out of that is corruption. Meaning the top will get away with it and the bottom will suffer because someone has to pay. Now, I'm not saying Donald Trump is to blame for all this alone, just like Obama wasn't to blame for everything alone back in the day. The houses are just as guilty, but you have to go in and see. You can't just be a partisan hack anymore. You can't just be a slave robot repeating talking points from these corporate politicians. This also goes for you guys who support Trump. You have to look into what actions are done by whom and what votes are done by whom. Follow the money. Who are the actions serving and benefiting? And the same goes for you people who support Bernie. And Bernie and Warren, who's been propped up like some kind of hero for trying to rein in the banks. And all these people have also supported the bill. And the bill, as it now stands, is horrible. Horrible, the bailout bill I'm talking about. It's crumbs for the people and giving all the wealth to about 1,000 people, the 0.1%. The people get scraps. And good luck to you who actually get some relief. It's lots of bureaucracy and conditions, even means tested. And they have to jump through all sorts of hoops to get them, and the payment will be delayed, and it's just horrible. It won't save. Maybe it can prevent millions of people in the street with pitchforks, because I don't even think the coronavirus can prevent that when you don't have food, you don't have work, and you're going to be thrown out of your house, which is the reality soon for maybe a majority of your population. But with this bill, I think they can avoid that. They can just keep you hanging on while they complete the eradication of the middle class. And why were you against the Soviet Union back in the day? Why? Why? If you're not against what's going on now. In fact, even the people in the Soviet Union had it better than how we will come out of this if nothing is changed. There will be a huge population which are basically slaves and a small elite which is ruling them. And in between you will have, of course, these despicable henchmen of the oligarchs, mostly politicians and bureaucrats. And even despite the corona crisis, they just give scraps for hospitals and local government. And if they really don't even go through the measurements of Covaxit, if they really just give up and say, okay, everybody back to work, then it's basically just government saying, hey, we just wanted to steal the last bit of middle class money. Now go back to work or back to unemployment. What about the bailouts? What about the free flow of cash to the elites? Surely after 08, 09 we must have learned, right? No. The bill is a disaster. It's worse than TARP in 09. There's no requirements. They can use this money, as they did last time, to subsidies, stock buyback, to inflate the value of their own businesses so they earn themselves more money, more profit, bonuses, hostile takeovers, and dividends. And basically, the corporations gets a transformative amount of play money to sustain their grip and wipe out competition. Free market? Ha! What a joke. No conditions for the corporations. Oh, well, small businesses are like normal people. Lots of conditions if they get any relief at all. I mean, why save small businesses? If they are successful, if they're onto something, drive them down so they can be taken over. No. Understand, pennies for the people, trillions to the corporations. I think the people and hospitals and local states and stuff, I think the total amount is 300 billion. Don't arrest me on that. I haven't verified that 100%. But I think that the number, if I remember, was 300 billion. Now they're saying the bailout pack is 2.3 trillion or something. I forgot the number that's floating about, but the real analysis is 6 trillion. Just remember that. And it's probably going to be more. This is just by today, at the end of March. So you can't partake in the 6 trillion bonanza that's going on now. And in addition, they are printing 1 trillion a day to keep the stock markets from plunging. So this is a loot aimed at shareholders and CEOs. And by the way, you know who else gets part of this bailout money? The deep state. Look for the heading, businesses critical to national security. Yeah, you'll find our friends in the deep state there. So even the deep state are going to have a hand in this looting party. Of course, they are working to maintain this order or unorder. So it's not a bailout for the coronavirus. It's a bailout for 12 years of corporate irresponsibility. If they're so fragile that a few weeks of disruption can destroy them, let them fail. Or again, take it over. Salvage what's critical for society. Salvage what's potentially profitable. And let the people get some of the money back. They're even bailing out cruise ships, who's not even paying taxes. It's insane. And not even hiring local. Usually it's a bunch of people from poor countries working there as the manpower. No. The result is a massive concentration of power. You know what? This is Borman's wet dream. Now, just again, to give you a perspective, to understand what's really going on. Let's say $6 trillion is the cap. That's being printed, that's being used. And again, according to modern money theory, they can do this. Because what they're doing, again, they are printing the power, the access to the assets. So if they didn't print the 6 trillions, the access would be fought for amongst those who had money. Like if you have $1, that's your share of the access to the current resources. If you have $1 billion, that's your share of the access to the current resources. Then suddenly introduce $6 trillion and give it to a player. Obviously, there's a shift of power. Now, why is not inflation again if they were using these $6 trillion to consume current resources? Yes, we would be done. But inflation won't come because basically they're just paying off debt. They're also deleting debt, by the way. This is how, the black economy can work or black projects. So I print a lot of money, I give it to you. Now you have potential influence over the current system. Okay? But you're not using it to consume the current resources in the system. You're using it to do whatever you want. It's like a free card. It's like a temporary unlimited powers card. You do whatever you want, whatever you need. Let's say build a UFO. So you're actually creating something. You're not even straining the system. You're actually adding to the resources, assets going around. So if you spend all that money that you got, then there you are. It's like, hey, ordinary money system doesn't count in your case. Here's a free card. Do what you want. It's basically that what it is. And again, it's the same. If you have $1,000 and you're spending $1 today, then 999 belongs to the future. You understand? So money is the potential use of that's why you can have. It doesn't matter if you have $1,000 in the bank or $1 trillion in the bank, because it belongs to the future. That's why they can just explode the money going around and then delete all debts and make sure it doesn't consume the resources, just take over the resources or even expand the resources and delete all debts, and voila, it's a power grab. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. I don't fully understand everything yet, but I understand enough to see the scheme going on, and I understand enough to know what the solution is, and certainly you don't have to be clever to understand that what's going on is wrong. But again, if $6 billion are being printed, and let's limit it to this, and there are roughly 327 million people, I think it's less actually, in the US today. You know what? That is $18,348 for you. That's your fair share. What do you get? Not even everyone, but some of you will get $1,200. That's how they're going to buy you. That's how they get your vote. $1,200 instead of $18,348. So that means for every goddamn sucker in your country, about $17,000 is going to the elites for every single person. Now, again, if you think, oh, but we have to bail them out. No, if you do that, this is your future. They're saying up to 30% unemployment, more than under the Great Depression. The Great Depression led to Soviet Russia, it led to Nazi Germany, and something similar maybe for us in the future. 30% unemployment. The majority of what's left of working people will work for corporations, be in the pocket slave for the corporations, and thereby vote of fear of losing their slave jobs. And the rest will be flipping burgers, cleaning toilets, and other low-wage tasks. I'm not saying there won't be possibility to create new businesses again. Maybe there will, but certainly not with investments. You can be lucky and maybe do something online, but again, it's a takeover of the system. Giving money to companies not operating is crazy. If you're not flying now, but you expect the same cash flow as before, even though you're not paying workers right now either because nobody's flying, what will happen in a month from now when you're still not flying? Again, we have to give you more money and more money and more money. No, so give the money to the people. I mean, the owners and CEOs of these businesses aren't personally poor, so they won't go bankrupt personally. If you give the money to the people, like FDR did, he put money in the pocket of workers and he saved the economy. Then nobody is suffering and the airplanes are not consuming anything. They're still on the land. So everything is just temporarily on hold. So giving billions to companies to run as if this was a normal running time is crazy. Because here's where the corona comes in as an extra add-on, right? Back a decade ago, things were running as normal. Now things ain't even running as normal. So giving money to companies who's not operating is crazy. And the solution, by the way, it's to give money to the people. That's the only thing that can turn this around. So if you're going to print money in the first place to solve this, then it must go to the people, not to the top. Now, the turnaround, and Richard Warner has the solution. Check him out. The RT interview is especially interesting. The interviewer and his opponent, some so-called expert, are flabbergasted by. He mind blows them. And I've also seen some lectures he have, and it's very easy. He has verified this with studies. This is hard facts, not speculative theories. You must put caps on executive compensation. Last time they spent 80 million. You must force emergency funds. Emergency powers must be hard to roll back. Otherwise you get cronyism, aka corporatism, aka fascism. And the solution, and we know this, China is doing this, have been doing this for a long time, Germany has been doing this, it's decentralization, decentralization, decentralization on all levels, especially economic. That is the only way that will avoid bubbles and boom and bust. And community banking is central there, and breaking up concentrated power is central. The whole money system must be decentralized. The future isn't local, decentralized, democratic money backed by not-for-profit community banks. We don't even need central banks. Central planners can never beat thousands of local community banks in the efficiency of credit allocation. We can create our own true local currencies without central banks. Key principles, according to Werner, is self-determination, self-responsibility, self-administration. 3 fundamental principles of the cooperative movement, by the way, which also is highly successful, and early on focused on establishing co-op banks controlled by local communities. Decisions of how much money must be printed, created, and who to give it to will be in the hands of the people, not the central planners. A banking system that avoids booms and bust cycles and ensures the funding that's needed is not a hypothesis. Let's take Germany. 70% of banking is accounted for by 1,500 community banks. They consist of local co-op banks, credit unions, local government-owned saving banks, and then the remaining 30% are either large nationwide banks or regional foreign other banks. So a basic rule in banking: large banks lend large amounts to large borrowers, not you, not me. Small banks lend to small and medium-sized enterprises. What types of banks lend to large-scale financial speculators? Large banks. They are the ones financing the criminality. Now, after MMT came out and revealed the scheme, they admitted it, and then the central banks proposed to increase their power as a solution to it. Like Werner says, their response was, oh, now you mention it, yes, banks create the money supply, and now that you know about banks, we think it's best for you if you abolish bank credit creation and abolish banks. That's what they call monetary reform. That way, we, the people, won't insist on creating community banks. We can't do it anymore. So they are preparing a crypto coin, a cyber currency. They're saying it's a digital world now. All cash should be abolished. All money should be digital currency created and allocated by the central bank. That way they get total control over all economic transactions. And it will be the greatest concentration of central banking power in history. And that's been the trend of this 20th century. Concentration of power in the hands of the few. Central banks have been main beneficiaries of this concentrated power. This unaccountable and limitless or absolute power has the consequences that since the introduction of central banks, we've experienced hundreds of boom and bust cycles, banking crisis, and this redistribution of wealth from the many to the few. 0.1% will soon become 0.01%. You know, theoretically, if this was an algorithm, we would end up with one guy in power of every resource in the world and everybody else being serfs. This is road to serfdom. Remember, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And the scary thing, and this is not a wild conspiracy theory, this is Professor Warner and the studies they've launched have found, and this is pretty scary, that the goals of the central bank is, of course, undermine civil liberties. But the means are digital accounts of dissidents and regime critics will be switched off centrally, so that purchases of necessities is impossible. That's a good way to keep people in line, quench any criticism, any attempt to change things to the better. Even if there's politicians running for office and, okay, we don't have an extortion file on this politician, we can blackmail him, he's not taking bribes. What can we do? Oh, we can just eliminate him from the system. So this is an Orwellian dystopia of total control and the end of all freedoms. Bank of England has already prepared an implant with its digital currency, a chip under the skin. And a scary thing is that this may be why the elite is now agreeing about pushing universal basic income. According to these university professors, it's a bribe to accept the microchip. So if there ever such a thing as UBI is implemented, never accept that it should come with some kind of control system. Never in the form of digital money, never in the form of microchipping. I mean, this should go without saying. Now, sons and daughters of America, you're laying down your lives for the oligarchs of America. If you don't take to the streets, if you don't all get yellow vests as soon as the corona thing is blown away. In fact, maybe you should do it even if they implement these measures now, while we're kept in a perpetual corona lockdown, you should still do it, because this is our future. It's better to lay down your life even for saving humanity than ending up in this prison state that is currently concocted. If you don't wake up if you've heard my whole rant and you understood just 50% of the gravity, then there's no excuse if you don't get a yellow vest. And I don't mean to bog you down with more fear and hopelessness. It's not hopeless yet. This isn't implemented yet. And you still have the ability to hear and learn about this. And it's all exposed in the open. And from now on, you cannot support. This is, I mean, okay, if you don't want to put on a yellow vest, at least never again support a politician that is supporting this system. And it doesn't mean go out of politics. Yes, politics won't solve anything, it's corrupt. But if you don't even vote, then you're just accelerating their power. They want you to not vote. So I'm not saying voting solves anything, but it can slow down the process. And voting and polls at least shows the sentiments of the people. If there was like 99% against this bailout, the politicians would, and Trump too, would not dare implementing it because they don't want to lose the election. Yes, they serve the corporate masters as much as possible, but they have a tiny little pressure from below too. And so you have to use that. You have to vote in new politicians or politicians who have shown to be principles. I know there are not many of them. But do your research, find out. Don't just use one source of information. Never just use one source. Don't just listen to me, for example. Go out of your echo chamber, out of your little bubble. Extract information from as many honest, plausible, fact-based sources you can. Avoid the most opinionated sources because they are spinning. Doesn't matter if they're spinning for causes you support. You can't trust the factual things. You have to do this basic education. I know you need to get food in your belly and roof over your head, but amongst it all, if you want to really solve the long-term crisis, get the yellow vest, start voting uncorrupted politicians, and express your voice as much as possible. And hopefully support programs like this because this isn't just America's problem. This may also be for the rest of the world. And even if a country like mine would fare better, we're still going to be affected by what's going on in America. And I already see half of our supporters have vanished because of the crisis. I don't blame you. If you who listen have the economic power to support a show like this, all we ask is $1 a month, then please do, because it won't be long until there may be not even any system-critical voices out there that you can trust. So we all have to do our part. America and the world, God bless, good luck, and good night. That's it. Your host has been, as some of you call me, Big Al. Until next time, if Providence allows, be seeing you.
Who is number one?